And then finally, number 10, one of the biggest strains on marriage, and this is a big issue, and I'm not going to get too deep into it because it'll take way too much time, and that is in-laws. In-laws can be a big problem. Not necessarily, but I've heard many, many times that in-laws can cause a big problem in marriage. But I will say this as my one point, that if you take anything away from this khutbah, try to remember this when it comes to in-laws. And that is that obeying parents is no excuse for displeasing your spouse. The wife has rights, and even the husband has rights. And if the in-laws are not getting along with the spouse, you have to consider that maybe you should not be living with your in-laws. Or maybe we need to make a change in how you interact, the interaction between the in-laws and the spouse. And there are many issues that can come out of this, but the key is, again, going back to communication. But there's something deeper than this, something much deeper. And that's these kind of underlying currents that I call them. These currents of anger, which we already talked about. These currents of disrespect and contempt between people. Not only between in-laws and the spouse. I'm not talking about just that, I'm talking about in general. The problem is that we're not really putting Islam into practice. And this is where many of our problems come from. Islam emphasizes so much on having a pure heart. It emphasizes so much on having good character. It emphasizes so much on having healthy relationships. But what do we see in marriages? We see so much disrespect. And I see it so much amongst a father or a mother and their daughter-in-law or their son-in-law. And they say, "You're no good for my daughter. You're no good for my son." This disrespect, where is the Islam? And they actually have heard stories of people striving against them, backbiting them to their son or daughter. Can you imagine that? A father or mother saying to their son or daughter, "You know, your husband or wife, they're awful people. You should not be married to them." And they backbite them when they're not present, talking about them to get their son or daughter to turn against their husband or wife. Where is the Islam? So this is the main problem, is that we're not really practicing Islam. We're not doing what I said in my first point. We're not putting Allah first. We're not putting Allah at the center of the universe. We're putting only ourselves and our own desires. And this needs to stop. So I want to conclude by making a dua from the Quran, which I think is the best dua. Allah knows best. And it's in Surah 25, Ayah 74, where Allah tells us to say, "O Allah, give us spouses and children who will be the joy and the comfort of our eyes, and guide us to be models of the righteous. Ameen. Aqimus Salah."